America at home during World War II. So, whereas the Great Depression had slowed down people's lives and they'd put, matrimony on pause, World War II puts people in fast forward. Men and women are going with instant matrimony. They got to get married before the man is shipped off to war. A lot of people who had postponed marriage as well might be able to afford it now with the economy picking up. It actually got to the point that some jewelers talked about worrying about running out of wedding rings. The other part of this is the draft first took single men, then married without children, then married with. Women oftentimes would follow their men to stateside military posts. Children are being affected by the war as well. Sometimes they had to fend for themselves, especially if their mother worked and their father was, across the ocean and such. And others saw the war as like this scout project, and they might have their own salvage drives or campaigns to sell war bonds. Basically, everyone is participating how they could. When it comes to learning about the war, we are going to see censors screening soldiers' letters, and they would block the publication of most photographs of like war casualties, though later they would authorize photographs of enemy atrocities, all about motivating the public. America did have a harder time controlling Hollywood, though. Basically, they really wanted propaganda feature films, but they also wanted these films not to be so heavy-handed as to drive viewers from the theaters. We are going to see the racism of America in films that came out during this time period. For instance, the Japanese in all films will be depicted as subhuman and repulsive, and you can even see that in the picture here. But Germans in movies during this time period, they could be good or bad. When it comes to women in the workforce, this war is going to give women tons of new job opportunities. The image of Rosie the Riveter really comes from this moment, because there was a shortage of welders as well as other skilled workers, and so this basically opens up these lucrative journeyman positions to women. You also see, amazingly enough, the development of like new power tools and production techniques specifically to accommodate the smaller average size of women workers. When it comes to women's share of government jobs, that's going to increase as well. So women are typing, they are filing, they're writing propaganda, they're analyzing intelligence. A lot of times it was about still hiring single women before married, still going with those stereotypes and everything. But married women are going to work as well, which meant that a lot of places are going to have daycare programs to be funded. Some of these women are working out of patriotism. Others are working to support their families. People were concerned that women working might undermine families and their traditional roles, but really men and women commonly assumed that women would want to return to the home after being victorious in the war. Would they? We'll get to that later. When it comes to Mexican Americans, there actually was a shortage of workers on farms and railroads during this time period because so many men are going off to war and so many men are having to work in industry and everything. So the United States and Mexico in 1942 actually negotiated a Bracero program where the Mexican government specifically recruited workers to come to the United States on contracts of 6 to 12 months and work on United States farms under this program, as well as on the railroads. That being said, Mexican Americans are still going to face discrimination, but generally speaking, we do see an improvement of working conditions because there's this element of that no one wanted to, well, not no one, but many people didn't want to alienate Latin America because we needed their help to wage the war effort. For Native Americans, many of them are going to move off reservation during this time period, and they're going to be a key labor force for military supply deposits in the West, especially. Native Americans' income is going to triple during World War II. And so this is going to serve them economically for generations to come. A lot of them are also going to stay where they moved to during the war after the war was over. This is also going to accelerate their fight for full civil rights. The thing is, Native Americans hadn't been made American citizens until 1924, but several states still had denied them the vote. But then with the United States Supreme Court, in 1948, they are going to require states to grant voting rights to Native Americans. For African Americans, they are also going to see economic advancement through war jobs. This is really going to begin a stirring of a movement, and actually we see a march on Washington in this time protesting racial discrimination by the federal government. This could have been a huge embarrassment to FDR, and so to avoid it, he is going to issue the Executive Order 8802 in 1941, which would bar discrimination, racial discrimination, in defense contracts and create the FEPC, which is the Fair Employment Practices Committee. This is a bit more symbolic than actually making changes, though. Unfortunately, the FEPC would only solve fewer than half of the employment discrimination complaints of this time period, and resistance to Black coworkers is going to remain strong. Companies that integrated are going to deal with riots and violence. Still, African American membership in labor unions is going to double during World War II, and wartime prosperity is going to raise their average income. Plus, we see a lot of African American women founding volunteer service groups that had been segregated and everything, selling war bonds, organizing USO clubs for Black soldiers. And in fact, this is actually when we see a lot of African Americans vote for the first time, because they've either moved north to find new jobs and everything, or they're across seas serving, and so it's actually a lot safer for them to vote. Still, there's all kinds of people moving across the nation looking for work, and this means they're crossing with other people of different regions, of different races, of different religions, and we are going to see conflicts from these clashes in culture. The most widespread violence is really going to be against African Americans who are continuing on with that Great Migration out of the South. African Americans moving into northern cities is going to cause tension, unfortunately. We see things like in New York, Harlem, a neighborhood will erupt in a riot after there were rumors of attacks of Black servicemen. Detroit sees violence during this time period as well. But it wasn't always just African Americans who faced violence. There was a lot of tension with Mexican Americans as well. White people might attack Mexicans who they saw as pachucos or young Chicanos who wore these flamboyant zoot suits. If you've ever heard the song Zoot Suit Riot, this is what that's about. These suits had these long, wide-shouldered jackets and were pleated and had narrow-cuffed trousers. And basically, a lot of white Americans viewed these Mexican Americans as delinquents or draft dodgers, and thus you get violence towards them. So why is this important? Looking at anything from this video.